I've been watching your reports, and I think they're very good. And one thing that I found was very interesting was your take of the Chicago Bears camp. Of course, they have Ben Johnson, who is everyone's automatically lauded, and look out, this is going to be the best offense in football. They've improved their offensive line. And Caleb Williams, he's such a talent. What did you see in Chicago's camp?
Yeah, Caleb Williams didn't look very good the day I was there, and I think it's been a little bit of a theme, through the spring and into the early part of the summer for them. And it's interesting because I think part of it is Ben Johnson doesn't give a damn what people think, and that to me is fascinating because that's probably one of the I'd say really the three most difficult football markets, like the markets that are toughest on the football team are Philly, Chicago, and Cleveland. I think those three because the football team is clearly number one in those spots. And in Chicago and Cleveland in particular, because of like the weight of the past failures of the team, there's like an extra layer of pressure on everybody. And so, somebody like Ben Johnson comes in, and I feel like he has to wear the failures of Matt Eberflus and Matt Nagy and all the guys, John Fox, the guys who've been there and failed before him. But what I kind of respect about it is like it doesn't seem like they're concerned about that. Like they know there are certain things that aren't going to look good, but they're going to be tough on their players. They're going to make it hard on their players. And so what they're doing with Caleb is they're throwing everything at him. They're trying to make him drink from a fire hose. They're seeing what he can handle. And then over the course of the next month, they're going to start to narrow it down to what he does well. But the day I was there, it didn't look great to the point where, I think pretty clearly the two quarterbacks behind him looked better operating the offense.
Okay, can I ask you, because I saw you say this in that video, and I found this very interesting, the strategy and the logic of let's throw a ton of stuff at
Yeah.
someone and then gradually take it away, other than it would seem that in most learning, you start with
Yeah,
a base of knowledge, and then you kind of pyramid it up from there.
right.
That sounded interesting to me.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that I think is like kind of it brings you some insight into the way we all digest this stuff is I think Ben would tell you there were points in Detroit a few years ago when it looked that way and no one was paying attention to it because the Lions were awful and people weren't as wrapped up in the development of Jared Goff in that offense as they are with Caleb Williams. So I think there are people in Detroit like we all remember. I mean, obviously, we all remember how pretty it's looked the last couple of years, right? Like, and how innovative it's looked and how advanced it's looked. But, I think Ben would tell you there were points early on in Detroit when people weren't paying attention. There wasn't this level of scrutiny on it where it did look this way. And it was rough at practice. And they were figuring out what they could do. And so, I mean, yeah, the logic is let's figure out what Caleb and the other 10 guys in the huddle, let's figure out what their capacity is for learning. Let's feed and feed and feed and feed and feed. Let's see what we can do. And then, by the time we get to, the end of August, we're going to make it so hard on them that the offense that we wind up running is going to seem easy and the games are going to seem easy.
Okay. Does that make sense to you?
I mean, it worked in Detroit, right?
I guess. Yeah, with a veteran quarterback. I mean,
Yeah. And that's the question, that's the question. Will it work with, I mean, because we saw that and I think that's the other element of it. Like I've seen like it fail before when a guy came from having a veteran quarterback to having a young quarterback and threw too much at him. I think the best example of that might be the Jets with Adam Gase, right? Where he went from having Peyton Manning and then he had Jay Cutler in Chicago. And when he got to Miami, Ryan Tannehill was already a veteran. And he tried to run a complex offense with Sam Darnold, and it just didn't work. I don't think Ben's going to do that. Ben did learn under Adam Gase, so there is a tie there. I think Ben is going to do what Caleb does well. It's just for him, it's a process of figuring out what that is, and we'll see what it looks like when we get to the beginning of September. But again, in like a place like Chicago where they're really tough on the team, they're really tough on their quarterbacks again because of the failures of guys like Eberflus and Nagy and Fox and Mark Trestman, and you can go right on down the list. And the failure of the quarterbacks too. I mean, this is for Caleb. He's coming on the heels of two failed first round quarterbacks in Fields and Trubisky. It's just seeing the day-to-day digestion of that from the Chicago public has been interesting.
And we talked about this last week. You don't have an issue with what Caleb Williams has said in terms of his goals and his wanting to be the first 4,000-yard passer
Yeah.
said that you don't think that's going to run contrary to what the rest of the team is trying to accomplish. It can actually work fine in tandem with that.
Yeah, I don't think Hardy that. I mean, I think all of these guys have individual goals, just as a baseline, right? Just to begin with, they all have individual, and I think to some degree this happens with all of them, and they don't verbalize it always. Like it even happened with Brady in New England, where I think Brady, part of what frustrated him at the end of his time in New England was the failure to put enough around him, which wound up affecting his individual performance. Like, do you guys remember? Didn't he say something along the lines of "we're the most miserable 8-0 team ever"?
Yeah.
Right? Wasn't
Yeah.
that what it was?
Yeah.
Right. And part of that for Tom was Tom didn't feel like he was playing well enough, and he felt like that was a product of what was around him. His individual performance was bothering him. And I think anybody who's competitive, that doesn't stop at your team goals. You're competitive about your individual performance as well. So I think that I don't mind when a guy puts something into words that everyone is thinking anyway, or everybody has individual goals, and they may not want to, again, put those into words or make those public, but those exist for everybody. The other thing is, I mean, look, like I think the 70% passer thing was directly from Ben Johnson. I think Ben Johnson said that publicly, right? And then the 4,000-yard passer thing is a nod to the history of the franchise and how they haven't been able to get a quarterback there, which is mind-blowing in 2025 that they've never had a 4,000-yard passer. But it's sort of the reality of it. So in a way, I think what Caleb's saying there is, I want to be the person who changes perception of this position in Chicago. So I don't have a huge problem with it.
If you like that clip, check out more videos from Toucher and Hardy here. Point slightly up and to the left. For more Red Sox analysis and opinion, hit this playlist. Point slightly down and to the left. And for all the latest from the Sports Hub, download the app at 985thesportshub.com.